Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk9527. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we're back with Punk6843 with 3 attributes: regular shades, dark mohawk, and the punkish cigarette. In real life, he is a big punk brain, working with ex-Big Four, TradFi, and AI before learning to code, and being red-pilled for crypto. He's currently helping build out SquiggleDAO and PunkDAO. Please welcome the legendary Arkaydeus to the show. Ark, how are you, man? Long time no see.
Thanks for having me on, Max. Yeah, great to be here. I'm a big fan of the show, so it's an honor to be on.
Oh, thank you. Mate, it was finally nice to meet you in person a couple of weeks back in London. You know, we'd been sort of engaging quite a bit through, I guess the punk sort of various sort of channels and specifically PunkDAO. But it was nice to sort of put a face to the name.
Absolutely. It's a big international circuit, isn't it? But we live on other sides of the world, so you don't always meet the people who are far away, but it's nice to finally catch up and do full circle and finally meet you in person. So yeah, it was great to host you in London.
Nice. Thanks for lunch too. I owe you. I owe you one. Maybe we could start off with the general first question that I ask every single punk. What's the story behind Arkaydeus? Like, why that handle? How did you come up with that?
Yeah, so it's actually almost a bit embarrassing. So Arkaydeus, it comes from RK, which is my initials, and then it was a gamer tag back from the I guess maybe late 90s, early 2000s. So, but a lot of people do the whole gamer tag thing. So yeah, I guess you can have a name and you stick with it. And after a while, you sort of forget the origin and that's just who you are. So yeah, I mean, would I go with this again? If I had to do it all over again, probably not. I mean, a lot of people have problems working out how to pronounce it. I'm usually just Art, but yeah.
Nice. Well, what were you playing back then?
Well, I'm a big strategy fan, so it's Total War, Civilization, Age of Empires, those kind of games. I mean, I've dabbled in some other stuff, but I always come back to the classics. I think as you age as well, the strategy games kind of age pretty well with you. So yeah, my kids aren't into them at all.
Nice. Well, thanks for sharing all that, Ark. And I guess might be great to just start off, I guess, with a little bit about your background and everything sort of preceding sort of crypto. We can go from there.
Sure. So I guess I've been a technology nerd for quite a long time. I got a BBC Micro, which was a computer built in the UK by a company that ended up becoming ARM. And they also did the Scion series stuff, but originally they made these like old school computers with the big floppy disks that you could actually bend. And we used to buy games that came in book format. So you'd buy the game and then you type up the code. And when I was 8 years old, that was my introduction into the world of tech. So yeah, started with that. And then I've always been a keen technology enthusiast, but also dabbling with programming and coding, etc. So yeah, that's, I guess, how it started. Then I went off and did a separate career in the city and got bored of it and eventually kind of came back to the technology side, by which time crypto was really kicking off and that caught my excitement. So yeah, took the pill and went down the rabbit hole on the whole crypto side of things and then ended up in the NFT corner, which I think is the most fun. And here we go.
Nice. Would love to sort of unpack that crypto side because I know you're working on some really interesting things on that side. But just to go back into a little bit deeper to your sort of background, what did you sort of study? I guess prior to all of this as well. I mean, it sounds like you just had a deep fascination for technology at an early age. But what was your sort of professional life and sort of areas of discipline before getting into crypto?
Sure. So I actually didn't study technology. It's always been my passion, but I felt like there were other things that I could do. So at university, I did economics and Japanese just because it involved an overseas year abroad trip. Studied at university in Tokyo, which was really fun, and then thought that I needed a career in finance because that sounded like it paid well. Didn't really know what I was doing. Jumped down that rabbit hole. Yeah, Big Four, worked in various investment banks. Kind of got a bit bored of the lifestyle though, and then tried to find as much technology in what I was doing as possible. And finally left that and went and worked for an AI company because it seemed like that's where, the innovation was happening. But along the way, I always felt a drawback to crypto. And then I guess it got to a point where, and I think many people have this, that they're spending all their time in crypto anyway. So they may as well just make that their whole life. And and that was me. Now, interestingly, AI is now kicking off again. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have been there for a while before as well. And hopefully I might be able to amalgamate the two together in some way. But right now the focus is crypto.
What were you doing at the AI company? Like, what was that AI company doing?
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting one. They take documents that were individual legal documents, and then they would use AI to extract the terms of the document to try and turn it into data. So, for example, if Goldman Sachs are about to buy a company that has 10,000 loan agreements, commonly those loan agreements are individual legal documents, each of which is slightly different and written bespoke by lawyers. Whereas what they really want is a big spreadsheet with 10,000 loans on and to try and standardize it. So the traditional way would be hire a team of paralegals to spend all night reading these documents and trying to standardize the strip out the kind of key terms and put it into a spreadsheet. But if you pay lawyers to do a really boring job and make them do it all night in a hurry, they tend to get bored and they don't do a very good job of it. And so the assumption with the AI was always that, well, it's going to be faster, it's going to be cheaper, but it's never going to be as good. And then we discovered that no, actually it was considerably better and it was faster and cheaper. And so, unfortunately that's the way the world is going. But I think the argument there really is that that unlocks the lawyers to do more interesting work that they want to do. So it doesn't displace them, it just allows them to do the higher stuff, as it were.
That's cool. What do you make of, I guess, ChatGPT and AI and all of the wonderful things that's going on that's really kicked off this year? What do you sort of make of that?
I'm absolutely loving it. I think, some people are scared of AI, how it's going to change the world too quickly. My spin, and it's actually, I think it's the pins post on my Twitter, but rather than worrying about how AI is going to take your job and moaning about it, the better thing is to go and look at, like, how can I enhance my job with AI? How can I use AI to achieve even more? I guess as an engineer, I'm quite lucky because we're sort of at the cutting edge of AI assist tools. So I think as I'm typing code with Microsoft Copilot, it also completes the boring bits for you. You can write a whole load of tests really quickly, and it frees up your time to focus on the creative side and the really interesting stuff. So it's had a very positive impact. The other thing is, I think from a learning perspective, it's great. Not just in coding, but particularly in coding, that you often, like, nobody knows all the reference information for every single library. It's just impossible. So commonly, developers will spend a large amount of time looking up reference material, which is often badly written or hard to find. So when you can go straight to an AI chatbot and just ask it a question and get immediately to the reference information you need, that speeds you up a lot. So it's had quite a positive impact on the work that I do.
Oh, nice. I need to get on top of that. I need to learn how to, use some of these prompts that are sort of going on. It's just changing so fast. I can't keep up. I'm a boomer in the technology sense. And just going back a little bit too, I guess you mentioned that you studied economics and Japanese. Does that mean that you're fluent in Japanese? Can you speak and read and write?
I lived there for a while, and I'm okay. My family, their native language is Japanese, mostly at home, but it's not as good as it was. You don't use it every day; you end up losing it, and the reading and writing's a bit rusty, to be honest. But it's fun.
That's cool. And Well, what point did you sort of transition into, I guess, becoming, I guess, an engineer and being able to, write your own code? Because I think, when you go through Big Four, investment banking, AI, where did that sort of happen for you in terms of being able to code for yourself?
It happened before. So as I mentioned, like I started with buying games in book format and writing them out when I was very, very young. I mean, it must have been like 8 or 9 when I started. And
Ah,
obviously I
okay.
wasn't very good back then, but it was fun. And in the days of 16 colors and not much expectation in terms of video games, like text-based stuff, you could, I mean, what a child could, play around with wasn't so far away from something big and professional. Like obviously now modern games are built by teams of 60 or 70 people, and it's a very different story. But yeah, the good thing, and I'd recommend to anyone who's interested and you're never too old to start, is coding can be used in many small ways to help small tasks in pretty much any job that's information or desk based. So I'd encourage anyone to pick it up, have a go. And ChatGPT has just enabled that. You can go in and ask a question, how do I do something? And then it pops up and tells you, but you want to ask a question about what does something mean, or how can I change the code to do it a slightly different way? That was really hard before. I mean, when I started, it wasn't even the internet. You had to find a book in a library and read it and try and work out how it was applicable to what you wanted to do. Now you just ask ChatGPT or Claude or Bard or any of these other ones. In fact, just been playing with Claude 2 this morning from Anthropic. Strongly recommend anyone check it out. It's trained to 2023. It seems kind of considerably better than ChatGPT in some things. So yeah,
That's
it's
cool. What's it called? Claude. How
Claude,
do you spell
yeah,
it?
by a company called Anthropic. Claude as in the French name, Claude.
Oh, okay, got it.
I think the address is just claude.ai.
That's super cool. And then your transition to crypto, what was that like, and when? Like, was it through Bitcoin, and how early was that sort of transition for you to discover crypto?
Well, I mean, I'll be honest, I messed crypto up. I discovered Bitcoin must have been around 2011. And I remember looking into it because there'd been some kind of malware hack and they demanded payment from people in Bitcoin. I started looking into it. I think it must have been around $6 at the time. Except for the way that you bought Bitcoin back in those days was through Mt. Gox, and you had to send money to Japan. It just so happened I lived in Japan with a Japanese bank account and was really interested in it and got nearly all the way there to buying a whole load of Bitcoin at around $6. And then I had a kid and then got busy and forgot about it. And then, years later, the price had gone up quite considerably and I kicked myself for it. But yeah, as someone who loves technology, I guess I've always been interested in the idea of online payments. I think I was one of the very early people to have a PayPal account. So yeah, it's the internet has to eat everything, and financial transactions being able to compensate people, that enables so much that it just felt like the natural evolution. And then when did I really get into crypto? Probably sort of 2016, 2017 again, when it started kicking off. Again, went down the rabbit hole, and fascinating that you could build smart contracts that existed independently of people and organizations. And then as someone who codes, being able to tap into value as well really unlocks a lot. So yeah,
Were
kind of
you
got my eye.
were you mostly building, or were you trading and investing in 2016, 17?
Bit of both. I mean, mostly it was the ICO boom. What's the next crazy idea? That was fun. But I turn up to local coding meetups as well and meet some of the early builders, most of which the project sadly died, but it was a learning experience along the way. And talking to people who were building stuff yeah, it was interesting. And at the time, I worked at a bank working on like building subledgers, which are basically large databases storing account balances. So it was pretty close to the crypto world in terms of what I was doing on a day-to-day basis. I think back in those days, the banks were just exploring like closed blockchain networks. It was before it really took off. I used to sit near an innovation team as well with the guys who are responsible for investigating future technologies. And they were really excited about Ethereum and what it could do. I think the one big disappointment is given how early a lot of these financial institutions have actually been looking into it. I think a lot of people don't really realize that even though TradFi feels like it's the opposite of crypto and that TradFi is way behind, the reality is that most of the people in TradFi have been super interested and have been exploring it for a long, long time. It's just regulatory stuff makes it difficult for them to embrace it fully in a way that I guess people in their independent capacity have been able to do. So, yeah.
Do you think regulatory issues are sort of the only barrier for TradFi banks to sort of get in, or is there anything else internally that's preventing them from adopting crypto?
I think it's the main one. And then the fear of the unknown. There's a certain arrogance that, they've been around for a long time and they've got huge engineering teams with some very bright people that they spend a lot of money on. And I think certainly at the beginning, there was this assumption that something awesome and game changing can't possibly come from the enthusiast sector. And I think, pretty early though, that was debunked. And I mean, I remember even back in 2017, JP Morgan had built their own version of Ethereum. And that's just grown and grown since then. We don't hear about it a lot in the on the crypto scene, on crypto Twitter, because people are obsessed with things that they can buy into themselves. But there's a huge amount of work going on in the corporate sector behind closed doors. There's no token to buy. So crypto Twitter is not very interested, but it's massive and it's building. And eventually I think the worlds will collide a bit more. And that's the dream. So, we just have to wait. But people are building stuff everywhere and it's just not very visible in some corners.
And what was your transition into NFTs? Like, do you remember what your first NFT was?
Yeah, so I think the first NFT I minted was a Squiggle. And I'm glad it was that one. It was, I had a couple of friends who are, super into the NFT scene. And one of my big regrets is I considered joining Flamingo pretty early on and decided not to. I don't know, I think it was something about the rage quitting that I wasn't keen on. And, that was a mistake. But yeah.
What was the entry price to get into Flamingo at that time?
Oh, I can't remember, but it wasn't, it wasn't very much now looking back at it. And but what really struck me is that I guess these people just were so passionate about the NFTs, and it's difficult to get too passionate about like a layer one protocol, but NFTs are fun, and that really caught me, and just the fun of putting ETH into the minter and seeing these cool squiggly rainbow patterns pop out. That's a feeling you don't get when you buy an ERC20, right? So yeah.
Flamingo DAO. I think I remember emailing Flamingo DAO after they'd sort of pumped and sort of said, "Oh, I'd like to I'm interested in getting in." And I think Aaron wrote back and he said, "Yeah, look, we're sort of closed out for the moment, but a seat would cost about 1,000 ETH. Let me know if you're interested."
Yeah.
So,
it started the whole NFT DAO thing, which has now expanded so much, and we're deeply involved in that, and we love it. And there are so many DAOs out there now that have so many different focuses, and each one is unique in the way it's set up and the group of people, and it's such a great ecosystem that if I was to define myself now, it would be as somebody who's fallen down the DAO rabbit hole with glee and loving every minute of it. So, yeah.
Well, do you want to talk about that for a little bit? I mean, what's your journey with DAOs? Like, what was the first DAOs that you sort of joined? And then we could have a bit of a chat around SquiggleDAO and PunkDAO.
Sure. So I'm into Squiggles. But prior to that, I think there were a number of investment DAOs which they just sort of set themselves up as fractionalized investment vehicles. So you could buy units. And I remember trading some of these DAO tokens. I don't think they did very well. I think there was one that invested in physical aeroplanes, fractionalized, and I thought that was cool and bought some tokens in it. And then, the practical reality of running an airplane leasing business as a DAO obviously hit home. And DAOs are hard to organize, right? And DAOs are difficult to get real world things done without the right incentive structure. But that was the heyday of new experiments, and people would just plow money into anything. So I think that was probably my first interaction with DAO. I didn't get very involved in like MakerDAO or like the early the DAO, but it was always a very interesting concept. So I think probably the first DAO I felt that I was like a firm member of and was part of my identity was SquiggleDAO. And I've been there ever since. I'm now one of the main contributors, and yeah, it's been an amazing story.
So what is SquiggleDAO?
SquiggleDAO is a collector DAO. It's a group of people who've got together collecting squiggles because they love squiggles. But they want to do something for the squiggle community. They want to celebrate squiggles, to promote squiggles to their rightful places, the birth of generative art, but also because they love them. And they enjoy talking about squiggles and doing squiggle events. And yeah, you'd be surprised how much you can geek out on something as simple as a squiggle. And I think what's touched me is when you have something like that to form a nexus around the community that's fun, that's enjoyable, that's artistic, that's creative to a certain extent, it brings out the best in people. And then obviously there's the financial part, which can sometimes bring out the worst in people, but that's human nature. And the challenge for certainly NFT DAOs is to focus on the positive side and to try and create a vibrant community where you're bringing people together because of something they love, and because of that passion, they're then willing to volunteer and to contribute their time and their passion and their energy. And it's an amazing world to be working in, and quite a contrast from turning up to a boring office where people are just there to collect their paycheck and go home.
Absolutely. With SquiggleDAO, I mean, I've admittedly bought and sold Squiggles, and I currently don't have any in the bag, which I'm a little bit embarrassed about because I know how culturally significant they are to the space and what they represent. But what's the context of SquiggleDAO? If you own a Squiggle, do you automatically become a member of SquiggleDAO, or is there some other things that you need to do?
When the DAO started, every squiggle holder was dropped 1,000 squig, which basically got you membership instantly. You can also buy squig, or you could buy squig at the time, and then you could join by donating a squiggle to the treasury, in which case you get more than 1,000 squig. And then over time, this has evolved. So that was a one-off, and then there were a couple of situations where you could contribute in different tranches, and then there was a raise. And now, because it's SquiggleDAO is a sort of standalone thing with its own treasury and 333 squiggles as of today. If you have a squiggle, you can join the Discord. There's a squiggle gated part, but then there's also membership. There's a SquiggleDAO NFT, which launched a couple of weeks ago, membership, which is replacing the ERC20 squig token. And then that allows you into the sort of full membership part where you get to vote on what the DAO does, how the DAO spends its treasury, the direction, and really allows you to access member-only areas. And as a DAO, we're trying to build as much functionality and utility as possible so that being a member is a great experience. And you really get a whole load of extra tools and cultural stuff to help enjoy your celebrating being a squiggle holder and everything that means.
Gotcha. Definitely take a closer look, and definitely have to keep my eye open to scoop a swiggle in this sort of bear market at the moment. But for you, like, what's so special about swiggles out of all the, I guess, art blocks collections that are out there for you?
So I think there's two things. I mean, the first thing is that whilst you couldn't really argue squiggles were the first generative art on chain, I think they're pretty much the most iconic large collection that was deployed very, very early on, that people broadly assign as kicking off the generative art movement. So SquiggleDAO, obviously, it's like a nearly 10K, or it will be when you finish minting them, 10K collection. You have the likes of Autoglyphs, which came earlier, but there are far fewer of them. But people then, they see that Squiggles were the first collection on Art Blocks, and Art Blocks has done such a lot in promoting the gen art movement that Squiggles have become iconic as representing the start of that. And they're still affordable. There's nearly 10,000 of them, but they're less than 10 each. So compared to a glyph or a punk, for many people, a squiggle you can get. And if you can't afford a 10 ETH squiggle, you can buy a SquiggleDAO NFT. Currently, the full price is about half an ETH. And that allows you to have group ownership of 333 DAO squiggles. So it's a very open community. So that would be, I think, the first thing. And then the second thing is, and this is, I think some people lose this, it's Snowthrow. It is Eric. He is a very unique person and very different from, I think, a lot of the other creators in the space. And I'm not going to say anything bad about any of them because, there's some wonderful people who've done amazing things. But Eric really strikes you as someone special just because his attitude to everything is a very humble and generous guy. He's very, very positive, and he does a huge amount to promote other people and the space as a whole. And so I think owning a squiggle, you're not just owning an amazing piece of artwork, but you're owning an amazing piece of artwork that represents the start of the movement. And you're owning an amazing piece of artwork that represents the start of the movement by the guy who, has probably done more for the generative art movement than anyone else, and is just universally loved by everyone. And so it's, all the pieces of the puzzle are there. There's just so many great ticks. There's so many positives. And that vibe permeates the SquiggleDAO community, the Discord, the wider community of Squiggle holders. So it's a great place to be.
You're about as passionate about squiggles as I am about punks. You could probably start a Squigglecast soon from the sounds of things, which would be kind of cool.
I love punks too. It's those two are, if I could only buy two things now and I had to hold on to them for the rest of my life and nothing else, it would be a squiggle and a punk.
Yeah, really, really special collections for sure. And what about PunkDAO? I think I've had a few PunkDAO PunkDAO members on PunkCast before. So I've had artist, and also the punk animator as well. But we never really got to speak about PunkDAO. And I know there's a lot of things going on around in the background, but might be good just to sort of share with everybody, for you, how would you describe PunkDAO? What is it?
That's a really good question because there's a lot of misunderstanding and it's not as easy to explain. SquiggleDAO is a DAO where people get together and collect squiggles and build cool squiggle stuff. But PunkDAO is a little bit more complicated. So PunkDAO started as a group of people who wanted to invest in cool stuff together. All punk holders, punks were like part of their identity. They wanted to buy a group of punks together to help promote the punk ecosystem. And then I guess it evolved because that wasn't enough. We wanted to make something that was also open to everyone and support the whole punk ecosystem, and there to be a place where punks can come together to coordinate and do stuff. So PunkDAO is in two halves. There's this initial group of people who put a whole load of money in to try to build something. And then from that was created the wider community DAO that was, all punks welcome. Let's create a central place where we can coordinate activity around punks, promotion of punks, building out the punk ecosystem, supporting punk projects. So it's in two halves. There's Punk Ventures, which is the group of investors, and then PunkDAO community, which is the big open community PunkDAO.
Gotcha. And to extend, what's your involvement with PunkDAO so far?
So I was there at the beginning, and back then it was just a group of people chatting about punks who were very passionate. We knew it would be good to organize because the punk community is very, very diverse, but it's also characterized by a high degree of decentralization, which is great. But lots of small groups and no one central organization. You have Yuga, they came along after I think PunkDAO started. Before that you had Lava Labs, but obviously the Lava Labs were trying to take a step back. So that created a bit of a void and allowed the community to come together and try and create something that could facilitate coordination. There are lots of other groups within punks and there's no one single voice, but the DAO is there to try to provide infrastructure for everyone to liaise with each other and, do stuff that involves more than one person.
Well said. And I guess for any punks that are listening out there, if you haven't done so already, definitely jump into the PunkDAO Discord or find your way through there. There's always upcoming events, and if you've got a great idea that you want to get off the ground that really helps elevate and promote punks, I think there's a community there, and there is a treasury also there to sort of support too. So make sure you sort of jump in there. And I guess for you though, part of I guess the moving from SquiggleDAO and PunkDAO, when you sort of take a step back and you look at DAOs, like what are the things you sort of love about DAOs and find interesting about it, and I guess what are things that you think that we still need to try and find solutions for?
Well, I'm going to put it out there and say I think that DAO is the most important organization structure that humanity has discovered since the company. And that's a pretty big statement, obviously, but it's yet to be fully appreciated by many people. But what defines a DAO is that kind of high degree of decentralization. And what comes with the decentralization is a whole load of compromises that are also not very well understood. And different DAOs are doing different experiments there. And I think we haven't necessarily discovered the winning formula for every setup. And I think different DAOs need slightly different setups to work effectively. So, I mean, just the DAOs that we've discussed, SquiggleDAO and PunkDAO, two very, very different DAOs. They're structured in very different ways. One is a single DAO that collects artwork. The other is an investment fund on one side and then a big open community group on the other side that is separate, that tries to coordinate people to do cultural stuff. So each different DAO has a different objective. We've seen a lot of people building protocols who then create governance DAOs on top. That's something different again. And then you get sort of DAOs such as Vector DAO, which is a great example, where a whole lot of people with a certain trade, like design skills, have come together and they're just trying to organize being able to win work in the design scene. And so people can come along to the DAO and try and hire somebody to do a trade. So DAOs can touch every part of humanity, but they represent an evolution where you don't necessarily have to have a company with one set of owners and a CEO. You can do things in a more cooperative way. I do liken DAOs quite a lot to cooperatives, but the whole crypto token voting system really makes that possible in a way that I think was quite difficult before on the internet. And yeah, it's great. And I spend all of my life in doing DAO stuff every day now, and I love it.
No, I'm with you, and I think that's probably why I joined PunkDAO as well. I think I'm just deeply curious about how this sort of evolves, and sort of feel like it is a better way for us to sort of coordinate resources and work together collaboratively in a more fair and transparent manner. I think when we sort of look at our existing sort of social structures around working for companies, I mean, you would get filtered out based on which university you went to and social background and all those other bits and pieces to get a job. I mean, ideally, if you were to get a job at Goldman Sachs, you would have to be from a top tier, university or something like that. But if it was for a DAO, like none of that sort of matters. It just depends on what you're willing to sort of contribute. You can be absolutely anonymous too, right? And I think that is a pretty special thing. But I think to your point, I think there's a lot of things to sort of iron out really around speed and coordination of speed around that too. So I think we still need to sort of figure that out, but deeply sort of interested. And I think I'm with you. It's an exciting way forward.
Yeah, I mean, DAOs come with a whole load of challenges as well. So whilst, you might have to have a certain CV to get a job at Goldman Sachs, once you've got the job, you can probably get a mortgage. Whereas if you work for a DAO, try explaining your source of income and getting a pay slip. And yeah, I mean, what country, what's the address of the DAO? That's the first thing that most people want, and there isn't one. So I do think that probably a lot of DAOs are going to move to models where they have an incorporated entity that sits within the DAO structure. And indeed, that's what SquiggleDAO have done. So, I mean, that might be worth touching on a little bit because it's something that we've recently gone through in SquiggleDAO that has been a painful process, but we've come out the other end set up to engage with the real world a lot better. So now there's an entity in the BVI, there's an entity in Cayman, and those entities can, in theory, enter into legal contracts with traditional service providers, and that allows things to be done slightly more efficiently, but also safer. And then the role of the actual on-chain DAO becomes more of a governance oversight role where people vote and make decisions, and those group of people can audit what's going on. And there's still the same need for fault tolerance and transparency, but you then also got the section of the DAO that does stuff that's a little bit more real world friendly. And so it feels like that's the natural evolution. And we've been doing some experiments there, and yeah, it's been an uphill struggle, but we seem to be making progress.
Yeah, it's interesting you sort of talk like that, right? Because like in my mind, when you think about just a basic collector DAO, I mean, that could just be 100% on chain, everything purely digital, no KYC, everybody could be anonymous, and just rely on smart contracts. But as soon as you're starting to organize events where you're gonna have to engage vendors and get invoices, you need some sort of legal entity sort of structure to funnel funds through bank accounts into the real world in various sort of jurisdictions and where these things are taking place, right? And I think that sort of starts becoming the challenge where you start tackling real world things, right? And I think that's probably something that DAOs probably aren't doing a lot of yet, and I think probably trending towards
Yeah,
is getting a little bit more, integrated with sort of real world jurisdictions and transactions on that level.
and I think what a lot of people don't realize is that just because it's all on chain doesn't mean that the laws of the land don't apply. And in the majority of countries, in the absence of a formal defined legal structure, a DAO is pretty much treated as just a plain old partnership. So if you own 20% of the DAO, then 20% of everything that the DAO does is you. And if that means some taxable event has happened, then you're on the hook for 20% of that tax. And if the DAO does something illegal, then you're involved in that. And people don't realize that. And so by incorporating and separating the governance function from the operational side, you do add that extra layer of protection for the DAO members. And when you've got DAO members in 50 different countries, that's a lot of legal jurisdictions to navigate. So it makes sense to keep the core parts of the DAO, which is people coming together, making decisions, as on chain, but then anything that involves liabilities, taxes, that kind of thing, in a hived off, safe environment that's segregated. And it's not that easy to do, but it's also not that difficult. And so, yeah, I think the real DAO innovation is going to be around that and how countries create these frameworks that DAOs can operate within. So I think we've seen, certainly in the US, there's the LLD, and I think Wyoming have their own version of a DAO structure, and that's popping up in other places too. So yeah, I'm excited to see how it pans out.
No, same, man. I think we could talk for ages on this too. I think I'd love or maybe another conversation for offline, but I'd love to sort of pick your brain on what you think about the concept of digital nations that Balaji was always written a whole book about, right? The network state and things like that. And I think probably very heavily linked into DAO structures and governance and how that all works and integrates with digital worlds and also real worlds, but maybe for another time. In terms of your CryptoPunk story, when did you sort of buy your CryptoPunk? And of all the punks you could have chosen, why have you gone with these specific traits?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So I kind of did a little bit of punk trading early on, and I didn't really settle on a punk that was mine. My forever punk, I bought the top. But I'm proud of that, and it means that there's less incentive to sell when whatever you sell at is going to be a massive loss. So the punk's become my identity, and I chose the punk because it looked cool. I mean, I'll be honest. I thought, well, I didn't want to buy like a super expensive rare attribute one because I thought, maybe this one's a trade as well. But when you buy a punk, even to trade, you want to buy a punk that you might be able to sell that somebody else might like the look of. So I bought the punk because, yeah, I like the Mohawk, I like the shades, I like the cigarette, it looks cool. And I thought, if I had to be a punk, which punk would I want to be? And this one looked like the one. And then I just became the punk. It's now my avatar, and I'm very attached to it. I'm not going to sell it ever. I'm not going to change it. So yeah. And then after a while, people come to know you as your punk. There have been a few people who've changed their punks, and that's a bit weird. It's okay, but it's getting used to a completely new look can be hard. I think the only person who's done it really well is Henry, because he changed his punk to a punk that looks so like the original one, but it was just smoking with the vape, that you could see the transition. It's the same person or the same, I don't know, character who's just in a different pose. That's okay, but you can't fundamentally change your punk. No, I don't know.
Yeah,
it is
a little bit weird. But no, your punk is definitely cool. 6843, and we've got both the cigarette as well. But were you looking at any specific traits at the time when you were going through your selection process, or you just found this guy and sort of said, this is me?
Yeah, I like the shades. I mean, I think I was definitely looking for one with shades. And then I sometimes tell people that my punk smokes so that I don't have to. And, when I was young, I used to smoke, and that's something I'm kind of not so proud of anymore. But I guess the punk then represents that past of mine, especially because it's there to look cool. And, maybe there was an element of that when, I was 18. And that's a part of me that I no longer do in the physical world, but it's part of my story. And the Mohawk as well, it's very punk. It's very, show offy in a way that, I no longer that person anymore, but it's still fun. And we all like to explore a different side of ourselves in the digital world that, maybe we don't want to do physically anymore. But it's another part of your identity to enjoy.
Man, I'm with you, right? Like, I think, like now, if you were to go out in the real world and promote smoking, I think we would get probably almost cancelled, right? You're not supposed to be promoting that; it's bad for your health, etc. But I don't know, man. Like, there's something cool about smoking, right? I think when you go back in time and you have a look at all the magazine articles and advertisements of all these stars smoking and all the movie stars that were smoking at the time, they just made it look cool, right? So I'm not gonna shy away from that. I know smoking's bad for you, and I don't smoke, only on social occasions, but there is something that looks really punk and super cool about smoking. Hopefully I don't get cancelled for saying that.
No, I think it's in the same way as, like, you can go and play an online shooting game, but you'd never like walk into a room with a machine gun and shoot a whole lot of people in real life. So I think these things allow you to explore a different, alternative reality in a safe way that is okay. And there's a bit of fantasy, there's a bit of escapism, but that's part of the fun. So yeah, and I love that we have that little smoking group as well. So for those who don't know, there's a small clique of smoking punks. If you have a smoking punk, either a pipe, a vape, or a cigarette, come join. And we don't do very much other than GM, but it's nice to form a clan. Humans are pack animals. We love creating these small groups to support each other, and that's what's great about the punk community. I mean, all the communities really, but especially the punk community. There's this big sense of identity and the in group, and we support each other. And yeah, I mean, also the Squiggle community is very much like that as well. But it's it's good to form groups. It's good to form families, and if you can do it in a fun way, then all the better for it.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I'm just looking at your trading history here. I mean, yeah, I mean, you did buy at the top, but
Oh, don't.
no, at that time, I mean, like, what was going through your mind? Like, I mean, you had to get a punk. Like, what ultimately pushed you to buy a punk and go, yeah, I need to get one of these things?
Yeah, I mean, back then, what was it? Summer 2021, we had the whole big takeoff. Apes were going crazy. And I think Visa had just bought a punk. Crypto was still, we'd had the big top, but everybody thought that was just the start, and that, Bitcoin was going to 100K, and we were ramping up for another massive run, and punks were going to $1 million. And yeah, I got swept up, and I'm glad I did. I mean, I look back and, was it the best time financially to buy Punk? Probably not. Was it a great time to join a community of great people and, start being part of the movement? Yeah, absolutely. And punks have opened lots of doors. So many people I've met through being a punk holder or being a Squiggle holder or just being into NFTs or being an engineer in Web3 that, I wouldn't have had that opportunity otherwise. So do I regret any of it? No. Have I optimized only for the money? No, absolutely not. And I think life would be boring if I had done that. And I'd probably feel like I was a failure and be disappointed that I haven't perfectly sold the top and bought the bottom. But none of us do. So better to take the fun route rather than like optimized for the most profitable route, because you're not gonna hit that. But fun is easy to hit. So yeah, I'm proud and I have no regrets.
No, absolutely. And look, man, like we talk about that all the time. We don't really talk about floor price with punks, or shouldn't be, but yeah, I think you're going to be fine. These things will hit $1 million one day, and this will be a bit of a blur. But more importantly, though, I think even after that, you've continued to double down on building with crypto punks and the sort of the punk community. What sort of point did you sort of start exploring after you sort of bought your punk and started to decide to sort of double down on punks?
So I think I was just really impressed with the punk community. The group of people is very, compared to other NFT communities, it's very high signal to noise. There's a lot of people who are builders, a lot of people who've been around for a long time, a lot of people who are doing interesting projects. And unlike some other communities, people don't just come and go. People feel very attached. And I think maybe it's something about, if you ask me, I mean, which two NFTs would you hold if you could only hold two? Again, Punks and Squiggles all day. They are the two collections. They don't really need to do anything because they represent the start of the movement. They are antiques. Whereas with some others, the teams have to constantly be pumping out new ideas and drops and other stuff to kind of maintain interest. Punks and Squiggles don't have to. So that's where I want to be. And then other people feel the same way. So it's a great set of people. Quickly you discover that. And then it's less about the token itself and it's more about the community. Yeah, that was the thing that really struck me. So having met so many wonderful people and feeling the excitement, I want to be part of that and I want to contribute to that and build what I can and help other people. And yeah, it's been a fun ride.
Awesome. And no, I think you've contributed so much to the punk community as well, man. So I really appreciate you being around. And what about just going back in history in terms of the timeline as well? How did you feel about, I guess, the whole Yuga acquisition of Punk's IP when that happened?
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a bit divisive, wasn't it? But for me, I don't know. I have a lot of love for Lava Labs, but it was clear that they weren't